you may be aware that the Isle of Man has made a significant number of serious mistakes over a lot of its capital projects. For example, on capital projects, we've had the ferry terminal at Liverpool, which started out, now I could be out $1 million or $2 million, but we started out at 29 million or thereabouts. I don't really know where we're up to now. It's open, but there's all sorts of legal issues going on. And I think I'm pretty confident we're somewhere north of 100 million. The reason the ferry terminal came about very quickly was that the Liverpool Council, quite reasonably, wanted to develop a cruise ship terminal exactly where the Isle of Man ferry berthed, right in front of the main buildings in the Three Sisters, I think they're called. And so the Isle of Man had to find somewhere else. And because it was infrastructure, well, then it goes to DOI. DOI put together a couple of officers, bless them, who were sent across to deal with Peel Holdings, which is a huge international company with endless legal advice and, professional competencies. These two people, I won't name them, these two people were sort of sent across, and I don't think Peel Holdings could believe what was going on. But the sum total of it all was that Peel Holdings took the Isle of Man government to the cleaners in no uncertain way. And whether or not now the ferry terminal is the right one in the right place at the right price, is very, very highly questionable. But again, they didn't bring in the appropriate consultant, which again, as it happened, was Royal Haskinen. Royal Haskinen know everything, all there is to know about Merseyside and all its complications. And had we had the right leadership there, then we wouldn't have wasted all that money on that project. There's another capital project which is it comes under the heading of, or known as the Lord Street site. And right now, I think the figure is somewhere around 80 million, where the contractors at the time were so badly handled by the DOI that they had to withdraw and have taken the matter to court. What went wrong there? Same thing. We needed to redevelop the Lord Street site, which I should explain to those who don't know, was the site very close to the ferry terminal at the Isle of Man end, obviously, where the bus station used to be. And the bus station was removed, and it left a big site that required redevelopment. And because it was of significant size, it tended to attract the bigger companies that would only consider projects 50 million or more because of the allocation of their professional competencies and the expense of that. Anyway, one particular company was chosen. And what that company didn't understand was that they whereas they thought they were dealing with the Isle of Man government, what they actually found was that they're dealing with an individual department that really didn't have the competence to deal with them. And as this developed, and sort of it's a little bit flippant, I suppose, but I described the way DOI tried to deal with this multi-million-pound project as an individual within the DOI producing a tender document which was more suitable or appropriate for some office furniture. It was that sort of incompetent. It was awful. The further this company got into this project, the more they realized that although they may have a rather unprofessional arrangement with DOI, all the other departments all piled in to say, yes, but we want this or we want that. And it was utter chaos. It didn't just fail once, it failed 3 times. I think the people who have taken DOI to court are the 3rd attempt. Finally, the harbour strategy, the island harbour strategy, was created as an idea out of DOI. They brought it to Tynwald. They proclaimed that this harbour strategy for the Isle of Man would cost in the region of 80 million, that it had the support of their consultants, and almost to a man, almost, Tynwald voted it through. I think the best example of how not to do capital projects would be to uh, pick on the harbour strategy. And I'll tell you the story about that, if I may. Um, how it happened was that the first I knew of it, as I've already said, it came to Tynwald. It was voted through, the £80 million. And by this time, I'm in my last 5-year house. And I'm very much involved in all the policy review committees of which we have 4. I was in 3 of them, so I was very much on the side of watching what government was doing and trying to focus on the areas it was getting it wrong. And so I asked the Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee to look at the harbour strategy. And in order to do so, to start off with, the committee called in the lead director of the consulting company, Royal Haskinen, who are a very well-respected European harbour development consultancy and delivery service, really highly respected. I rang the director, who had a particular responsibility for the Isle of Man project that had just been passed through Tynwald at £80 million. I asked him to come over and talk to the committee. He agreed to do so. Now, what I'm going to tell you now will be hard to believe, but I'm telling you fact. And this is supported by the Hansard entry in our committee report. One of the first questions I asked of the director was, well, in what way did you become involved in this project? He said, well, the harbour master for Douglas rang me up, invited me over, and asked me to consider an A3 drawing of what he considered needed to happen to the harbour. It wasn't to start from scratch. It was to do a critique of that project, and no more and no less, which I did. So more or less my next question was, could I ask you, had you been brought over in the first instance as a highly respected consultant to, as it were, assist the Isle of Man build a harbour strategy, would you have done this? And he said, no. It's in Hansard, no. So if you think about it, look at the arrogance of the DOI there. They decided, their operating officers decided what they wanted to happen as an operational, at a strategic level, a high-level project level, brought it to Tynwald and said in Tynwald that they had the support of Royal Haskinen, when in fact they had the support, or the commentary, that's all, on what they, DOI, had decided to do. To cut a long story short, we produced our report on this, and all I can say is that our harbour strategy never saw the light of day again, and is probably now living out its retirement in a dusty cupboard somewhere at the back of an empty DOI office somewhere. And yet, had that Environment and Infrastructure Policy Review Committee not conducted a review of that process, we would have falsely spent £80 million by now on the harbour strategy. So I think that's enough for me to describe very significant incompetence in dealing with capital projects.